Welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most misunderstood periods in history, the Middle Ages. When people hear words like feudalism or medieval Europe, they imagine kings, knights, and powerless peasants stuck in a brutal system where nothing ever changed. But what if that image is mostly wrong? In this video, we'll uncover how feudalism actually worked, why slavery disappeared, how power really functioned, and how this strange medieval system became the foundation of the modern world. By the end, you'll understand why medieval people didn't think in terms of nations, why loyalty mattered more than law, and why the so-called Dark Ages were anything but dark. Stay until the end, because the Middle Ages weren't a dead end. They were the blueprint. Let's begin. And here's the part most videos never talk about. Once you understand feudalism, modern politics, power, and inequality start to make a lot more sense. So stay with me until the end, because the Middle Ages weren't the Dark Ages. They were the blueprint. Let's begin. Medieval Europe is often imagined as a frozen, backward, and isolated world, a place where roads were empty, books were forgotten, and fear ruled everyday life. In popular culture, the Middle Ages are portrayed as a long night between the light of antiquity and the awakening of the Renaissance. But this image is not just simplified, it is deeply misleading. Yes, most people were born, lived, and died within a few kilometers of their village. But at the same time, tens of thousands of pilgrims regularly traveled across continents to reach Jerusalem, Rome, or Santiago de Compostela. Merchants crossed seas and deserts. Diplomats, missionaries, mercenaries, and adventurers moved between kingdoms. And figures like Marco Polo demonstrated that the medieval world was far more connected than we usually assume. Even more surprisingly, this so-called Dark Era was a time of massive cultural exchange. Europe adopted paper and numerical notation from the Islamic world, preserved and reinterpreted Greek philosophy through Arabic translations, and eventually obtained gunpowder and compass technology from China. Meanwhile, the political structures of the time had little in common with the modern idea of a nation-state, even though medieval history is constantly used today in national debates. This contradiction is exactly why the Middle Ages are so fascinating. On this channel, we try to peel away these layers of myth and simplification. Today's topic lies at the heart of that effort. We are going to talk about feudalism, not as a stereotype, but as a living system that shaped Europe for centuries and continues to influence the modern world in ways we rarely notice. We will explore why nations are not ancient or natural entities, but relatively recent political inventions. We'll ask where feudal titles like counts, dukes, and marquises came from, and where they disappeared to. We'll discuss why serfdom, paradoxically, once represented progress rather than decline. And finally, we'll see how religion, warfare, land ownership, and power became tightly intertwined in medieval society. At first glance, feudalism seems easy to explain. A king rules the land. Beneath him are powerful nobles. Below them are knights. And at the bottom, peasants work the soil, barely surviving. This image is not entirely wrong, but it hides far more than it reveals. In reality, feudalism was not a centrally planned system. No one sat down and designed it. It emerged gradually as a practical response to chaos. And to understand why it appeared, we must first look at what came before it. The Roman Empire was built on slavery. Its economy depended on a constant supply of enslaved laborers, captured during endless military expansion. But Roman slavery was different from the racialized slavery of the modern Atlantic world. Slaves could come from any background. They could sometimes buy freedom. Some even rose to positions of influence. Slavery was brutal, but it was also flexible. The problem began when Rome stopped expanding. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, Rome had reached its limits. There were no more rich provinces to conquer. Fewer wars meant fewer prisoners. The slave supply declined. At the same time, political instability exploded. Emperors rose and fell at the whim of the army. Corruption became systemic. Cities grew overcrowded, unhealthy, and dangerous. As a result, people began leaving the cities. This shift may sound familiar. It was, in many ways, the reverse of modern urbanization. Rural land suddenly mattered again. Food production became a priority. And free people, not slaves, were now the main workforce available. Large estates, known as latifundia, adapted. Landowners offered protection, land, and stability. In exchange, workers gave a portion of their harvest and pledged loyalty. These workers were not slaves, but they were no longer fully independent either. This was the birth of dependency-based agriculture. Meanwhile, the Roman state itself was losing authority. Roads fell into disrepair. Armies became unreliable. When barbarian raids increased, landowners fortified their homes, turning villas into castles. Protection became local. Loyalty became personal. By the time the last Western Roman emperor was removed in 476, the empire had already dissolved in practice. Yet to contemporaries, Rome did not truly vanish. The Eastern Roman Empire still stood. Latin remained the language of law and religion. Roman institutions survived in fragmented form. Even barbarian kings claimed legitimacy through Rome. Feudalism grew from this strange half-life of empire. In Western Europe, no single power could reassert full control. Authority fractured. Land became the foundation of power. Military service replaced citizenship. Loyalty replaced law. This environment produced feudalism, a system based not on institutions, but on personal relationships. A lord granted land to a vassal. In return, the vassal swore loyalty and military support. Peasants worked the land, protected by the local lord. Everyone depended on everyone else, but unevenly. Importantly, feudalism was never uniform. In France and the lands of the former Carolingian Empire, feudal fragmentation reached its peak. In England, stronger royal authority survived, especially after the Norman conquest. In Spain, constant warfare against Muslim states encouraged unity. In Italy, wealthy cities broke free from feudal control altogether, becoming republics ruled by merchants rather than nobles. This diversity is crucial. Feudalism was not a single system, but a spectrum of arrangements shaped by geography, warfare, trade, and culture. Another common myth is that medieval society was rigid and static. In reality, social mobility did exist, especially through war, service, and the church. A talented knight could rise. A clever merchant could gain influence. A peasant's son could become a bishop. Power was unstable, constantly contested. And this instability produced something unexpected: competition. Countless small lords competed for land, wealth, and prestige. Cities competed for trade. Kingdoms competed for legitimacy. This brutal competition over time encouraged innovation, organization, and efficiency. laying foundations for capitalism. Cities became laboratories of change. Unlike rural estates, cities needed contracts, courts, banks, and rules. Merchants demanded predictability. Artisans formed guilds. Wealth concentrated not in land, but in money. Families like the Medici rose not through noble blood, but through finance. This urban world slowly revived Roman ideas of law and citizenship. For the first time since antiquity, power began shifting away from landowners. Yet, one thing was still missing: the nation. Medieval people did not think of themselves as French, German, or Italian in the modern sense. Identity was local and religious. You were a Christian, a villager, a subject of a lord. Language differences were obvious, but not politically decisive. Nations, as we know them, are a product of centralized states. They emerged when rulers needed loyalty, not just from nobles, but from entire populations. Borders, education, standardized language, and shared myths became tools of power. Ironically, it was the success of feudal fragmentation, competition, cities, capitalism, that eventually made feudalism obsolete. Centralized monarchies absorbed noble power. Standing armies replaced feudal levies. Law became institutional. The church lost its monopoly on identity. And slowly, over centuries, feudal Europe transformed into the modern world. This transformation was slow, chaotic, and unplanned. But without it, modern society would not exist. If you want to explore how this process unfolded in specific regions, France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, Eastern Europe, or the Italian city-states, we're ready to continue. For now, we hope this extended journey through feudal Europe has helped you see the Middle Ages not as a dark void, but as a complex, dynamic, and deeply influential era. When we talk about the Middle Ages, most people immediately picture a dark, frozen world. Endless mud roads, filthy villages, ignorant peasants, and brutal lords ruling with iron fists. It's a vision that has been repeated so often in movies, games, and pop culture that it feels almost unquestionable. But the truth, as usual, is far more complex and far more interesting. Medieval Europe was not a single, unified place. It was a patchwork of cultures, laws, languages, and traditions. While some people indeed lived their entire lives within a few kilometers of their birthplace, others traveled astonishing distances. Pilgrims crossed continents to reach Rome, Jerusalem, or Santiago de Compostela. Merchants moved goods between the Islamic world and Northern Europe. Diplomats, scholars, and adventurers connected regions that many assumed were completely isolated. Even figures like Marco Polo were not strange exceptions. They were part of a broader world that was far more connected than we like to imagine. At the same time, the Middle Ages are often blamed for a supposed collapse of knowledge and progress. Yet their most Europe absorbed ideas and technology from across the world. Arabic people replaced Roman law. Paper slowly took the place of parchment. Windmills, clouds, and new agricultural techniques transformed. Gunpowder arrived from China, forever changing warfare and politics. So if the Middle Ages were not simply dark, why do they feel so alien to us? One major reason is that medieval society was organized according to rules that no longer exist today. Concepts we take for granted, like citizenship, equal laws, or national identity, meant little or nothing back then. People did not think of themselves as French or German in the modern sense. Their identity came from religion, family ties, social status, and loyalty to a local lord. And this brings us to one of the most misunderstood systems in history: feudalism. At first glance, feudalism seems simple. A king sits at the top. Beneath him are nobles. Below them are knights. And at the bottom are peasants, endlessly working the land. This pyramid is taught in schools, drawn in textbooks, and repeated everywhere. But real feudalism was far messier, more flexible, and often deeply contradictory. To understand how it emerged, we have to go back to the final centuries of the Roman Empire. Rome was built on conquest, and conquest depended on slavery. As long as the empire expanded, new slaves constantly flowed in. But once expansion stopped, that system began to crack. Fewer wars meant fewer captives. Fewer slaves meant higher costs. And higher costs made slavery less practical. At the same time, Rome faced internal decay. Political power shifted rapidly. Emperors rose and fell. Civil wars drained resources. Cities became overcrowded, unsafe, and expensive. Slowly but steadily, people began leaving urban centers and returning to the countryside. Land became the most valuable resource of all. Large estates, known as latifundia, grew in importance. Instead of slaves, landowners relied on free or semi-free farmers who worked the land in exchange for protection and a portion of the harvest. These farmers were not slaves, but they were not fully independent either. They were tied to the land by debt, obligation, and necessity. As central authority weakened, local landowners took on new roles. They built walls, raised private armies, settled disputes, collected dues. Protection no longer came from Rome. It came from the nearest strongmen with soldiers. By the time the last Western Roman emperor was deposed in 476, the empire was already hollow. But for the people living through it, Rome did not simply vanish overnight. Roman law survived. Latin remained the language of administration. The church preserved continuity. And in the East, the Roman Empire continued for another 1,000 years. In the West, however, power fragmented. This fragmentation was the perfect breeding ground for feudalism. Authority became personal rather than institutional. Loyalty mattered more than laws. Land replaced money as the foundation of power. A lord granted land to a vassal in exchange for military service. That vassal might then divide his land again, creating layers of obligation and dependence. Importantly, feudalism was never a single universal system. In France and Germany, it developed into a complex web of overlapping loyalties. In England, kings maintained stronger control, especially after the Norman conquest. In Spain, feudal relationships were shaped by centuries of warfare during the Reconquista. In Italy, powerful city-states like Venice, Florence, and Genoa rejected classic feudalism altogether in favor of trade-based power. Even peasants were not all the same. Some were free farmers, others were serfs, bound to the land. While serfdom sounds horrifying, and often was, it also provided stability in a violent world. A serf could not easily be expelled, sold separately from the land, or arbitrarily killed. In an era of constant war, this security mattered. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church became one of the most powerful institutions in Europe. It owned land, collected taxes, crowned kings, and claimed authority over souls. Sometimes it acted as a stabilizing force. Other times it fueled conflict. Popes and emperors competed for supremacy. Bishops ruled territories. Monasteries became centers of knowledge, wealth, and innovation. Slowly, quietly, something new began to grow within this feudal world. Cities. Trade revived. Markets expanded. Money returned as a tool of power. Merchants grew wealthy without owning land. Guilds organized labor. Banks appeared. Contracts replaced oaths. Written law slowly regained importance. Urban elites challenged nobles. Kings allied with merchants against feudal lords. Standing armies replaced feudal levies. Taxes replaced land-based obligations. Bit by bit, the foundations of feudalism eroded. And with them, a new idea emerged: the state.